and get out of here.
Hey, you, let me tell you something, you low-life, lying, four-flushing sack of shit.
Uncle Buck made us laugh, but the real stories behind its cast tell a different, far more complex picture. Looking back after Sieben and Dreißig years, what stands out to me isn't just the film, but the lives that quietly unfolded beyond it. John Franklin Candy was born on October 31st, 1950. He played Buck Russell in Uncle Buck, 1989, the loud, chaotic, but ultimately warm-hearted uncle who holds the entire story together. When I look back at his performance now, what stands out to me is not just the humor, but the emotional safety he created on screen. There was something about his presence that made even the messiest situations feel human. By the time he took this role, he was already an established name, known for films like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles and The Great Outdoors. But behind that comfort he brought to audiences, there were quieter struggles shaping his life. Losing his father at a very young age left a mark that never fully disappeared, and over time, health challenges became part of his reality. What makes his story resonate with me is how he continued working, showing up, and giving people joy, even when things were not simple behind the scenes. His passing in 1994 at the age of 43 adds a layer of reflection when revisiting the film today. It reminds us that sometimes the people who make us laugh the most are carrying more than we ever see. And as we move from the heart of the film to one of its youngest breakout phases, the contrast becomes even more striking. Macaulay Culkin was born on August 26, 1980. He played Miles Russell, the sharp, observant young boy who often acts older than his years. Watching his performance now, it feels like a moment right before everything changed for him. At the time, he was just 9 years old, still early in his career, but already showing the timing and presence that would soon make him one of the most recognizable child actors in the world. What stands out when reflecting on his journey is how early success can reshape a life. Over the years, he has spoken openly about the challenges within his family during his rise to fame, including conflicts over control and finances. That kind of pressure at a young age can change how someone experiences both childhood and success. Later in life, he went through periods that were more difficult, including legal issues and personal loss. But what I find meaningful is how his story did not end there. In more recent years, he has spoken about finding stability, building a family, and reconnecting with a sense of normal life. It adds a different layer when watching him in Uncle Buck because you are not just seeing a character, you are seeing the beginning of a very complex journey. And speaking of young actors navigating early roles, the next story takes us in a direction that feels quieter, but no less meaningful. Louisa Kelly was born on March 9, 1972. She played Tia Russell, the teenage niece whose tension with Buck drives much of the film's emotional arc. What makes her story interesting to me is how closely her performance connects with her real-life experience at the time. She has shared that she understood Tia's sense of disconnection, especially after moving during her teenage years and feeling out of place. That personal connection gives her performance a grounded quality that still holds up today. But what really sets her apart is what she chose to do after the film. Instead of immediately chasing more roles, she stepped back to focus on education and personal growth. That decision might not sound dramatic, but in an industry that often rewards constant visibility, it takes clarity to pause and choose a different pace. She later returned to acting and built a steady career, balancing professional work with family life. To me, that path reflects a different kind of success, one that is not built on constant exposure, but on long-term stability. And as we move forward, the next actor's story shows what happens when early exposure to the industry takes a very different emotional toll. Gaby Hoffmann was born on January 8, 1982. She played Maisie Russell, the youngest child in the family, whose innocence adds contrast to the film's chaos. At first glance, her role seems simple, but her real-life background adds unexpected depth when you look closer. She began working at a very young age and grew up in an environment that was far from typical. That early exposure to the industry shaped her path in ways that were not always easy to navigate. After stepping away from acting in her late teens, she spent years trying to find direction, dealing with uncertainty that many former child actors quietly experience. What I find meaningful is not just that she returned to acting later, but how she did it, gradually, through independent projects, rebuilding her place in the industry on her own terms. It shows a different kind of resilience, one that is less visible but deeply personal. And just when you think the stories are becoming more grounded, the next transition brings us back to a figure whose presence in the film carried a different kind of strength. Amy Marie Madigan was born on September 11, 1950. She played Chanice Kobolowski, Buck's girlfriend, a character who brings both grounding and quiet strength to the story. When I revisit her performance now, what stands out is how naturally she balances Buck's chaos with calm, creating a relationship that feels believable rather than exaggerated. By the time she joined Uncle Buck, she had already built a respected career, including an Academy Award nomination for twice in a lifetime. What I find particularly meaningful about her journey is not just her professional longevity, but the consistency in her personal life. Her long-standing marriage to Ed Harris reflects a level of stability that is often rare in the entertainment industry. At the same time, she has spoken about the challenges of aging in Hollywood, especially for women, where opportunities can shift over time. More recently, she experienced a major personal loss when her home was affected by the California wildfires, a reminder that even established careers do not shield anyone from life's unpredictability. And yet, her continued work and recognition later in life suggests something deeper, endurance that does not rely on constant visibility. That idea of stepping away from the expected path becomes even more striking in the next story. Jay Underwood was born on October 1st, 1968. He played Bug, Tia's boyfriend, a smaller but memorable role defined by attitude and presence. What makes his story stand out to me is how different his life became after his time in Hollywood. In the late 1980s, he was already a familiar face in youth-oriented films, building what looked like a steady acting career. But instead of continuing along that trajectory, he made a deliberate shift. After years in the industry, he chose to leave acting behind and dedicate his life to ministry, eventually becoming a pastor. That kind of decision is not something you see often, especially after investing so much time in building a career on screen. It reflects a personal redefinition of purpose that goes beyond public recognition. There was also a moment earlier in his career involving a shelved film project that added a sense of disappointment and may have influenced his direction. But rather than framing his story around what did not happen, I think it is more accurate to see it as a conscious transition towards something that felt more meaningful to him. And just when it seems like these stories are settling into quieter paths, the next figure brings us back to a performer whose influence extends far beyond a single role. Laurie Metcalf was born on June 16, 1955. She played Marcy Dahlgren Frost, a brief but memorable character in the film. Even though her screen time in Uncle Buck is limited, her overall career tells a much larger story. She is widely recognized for her work in television, particularly Roseanne, and for her achievements on stage, where she has built a reputation as one of the most respected actors of her generation. What stands out to me is her approach to the craft itself. She has never relied on celebrity culture or constant public attention to maintain relevance. Instead, she has focused on performance, moving between theater, film, and television with a level of consistency that speaks to discipline rather than trend. Her personal life has included its share of changes, including marriages and raising a family, but she has managed to balance those responsibilities with a demanding career. There is also something compelling about her off-screen personality, often described as reserved, which contrasts with the intensity she brings to her roles. That contrast reinforces the idea that longevity in this industry does not always come from visibility, but from commitment to the work. And as we transition forward, the next story highlights someone who built a career in an even quieter but equally determined way. Elaine Bromka was born on January 6, 1950. She played Cindy Russell, the mother of the Russell family, a role that anchors the domestic side of the film. When I think about her career, what stands out is its breadth rather than its spotlight. She has worked across television, film, and theater for decades, appearing in a wide range of productions without becoming defined by a single role. That kind of career might not attract constant attention, but it reflects a different kind of success, one built on adaptability and persistence. Beyond acting, she has also taken creative control of her work, developing and performing her own stage projects, including a one-woman show that explored historical figures. That willingness to create opportunities rather than wait for them speaks to a deeper level of artistic independence. There are also smaller moments in her story that reveal her sense of identity, such as standing firm on creative decisions even when under pressure to conform. Those details may seem minor, but they contribute to a larger picture of someone who understands her place in the industry and chooses how to navigate it. Garrett Michael Brown was born on November 7, 1948. He played Bob Russell, the father of the Russell family, a role that quietly stabilizes the emotional structure of the film. When I look at his performance now, what stands out is how understated it is. He does not dominate scenes, but he makes them believable, which is something not every actor can do. His career reflects that same quality. Before fully committing to acting, he worked different jobs, including in healthcare and hospitality, while gradually building his craft. That kind of path does not come with instant recognition, but it builds resilience. Over time, he found steady work in television and film, becoming one of those familiar faces audiences recognize, even if they do not always remember the name. What I find meaningful is how he never limited himself to one identity. Beyond acting, he explored writing, painting, and even music, showing that creative expression does not have to stay in one lane. His life also included personal challenges, including a divorce, but he continued moving forward, adapting rather than stopping. That adaptability is something you start to notice more when revisiting films like Uncle Buck, because it reminds you that many careers are built quietly over decades, not in sudden moments. And just when you think the stories are settling into reflection, the final name on this list brings a much more fragile sense of how things can end. Brian Tarantino was born on March 27, 1959. He played E. Roger Coswell, a smaller supporting role that many viewers might not immediately remember, but one that still contributes to the film's overall texture. His career followed a path that I personally find very compelling, not because of massive fame, but because of consistency. He worked across theater, television, and film, often portraying grounded, working-class characters that felt authentic. That ability to disappear into roles is something that defines many strong character actors. Later in his career, he reached a new audience through The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, where he was part of an ensemble that received industry recognition. Moments like that show how a career can evolve over time, even without constant spotlight. However, his story also reminds us of how unpredictable life can be. He passed away on November 2, 2019, at the age of 60. When looking back at his body of work, what stays with me is not just the roles themselves, but the sense of dedication behind them. He represents a group of actors who build entire careers on credibility rather than visibility. And in many ways, that kind of legacy feels just as important when revisiting films from this era. Looking back after 37 years, Uncle Buck feels less like a simple comedy and more like a snapshot of real lives in motion. Some found peace, some faced loss, and others quietly kept going. That contrast is what stays with me. If this reflection meant something to you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. And let me know in the comments which story stayed with you the most, because sometimes what happens after the film is the part we never forget.